Before we kick into our guests today, thank you so much for all your fashion critiques. I am 90% through with grading them, so if you didn't see your grade come through yet, it will probably tonight or tomorrow morning. I apologize for the delay. But overall, really great work. Just a couple call outs to make sure that you really follow the directions, because part of this class is industry preparedness, right? Whatever you're asked in the industry, make sure that you're answering the questions the right way. It sounds silly, but one of the questions asked for the address of the place you went. Even if you went to the FIT Museum, just make sure you're answering the question fully. I went to the FIT Museum, which is located at 227 West 27th Street. It sounds silly, but it's kind of part of what the assignment is to make sure that you're following the directions clearly. Other than that, it's been great. I don't have any other major call outs. The second one will be due October 30th. So what is that? 2 weeks from today. So if you haven't yet attended your second event, make sure that you're figuring out what you're going to do for that. It sounds like a lot of people really enjoyed the African exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum. A lot of people enjoyed the FIT exhibit about food. So make sure that you're figuring that portion of it out. Lecture prep questions. Just a reminder that this template is posted under Brightspace, and that's the template that you should use, either printed out or if you're emailed to me, so that it all comes through in a nice format. But thank you for those of you who have submitted so far. Everyone's got their laptops closed. Thanks. Make sure you close down your phones as well. And please stay alert today with our guest. So our guest today is Chelsea Maxine Agawa. She's the VP of Design at the Shantex, and she's had a focus on sustainability, and she's working on her master's in science. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to her today. It's a great precursor to next week, when we are the kickoff to the Sustainability Awareness Week that's happening. After our interview today, I'm going to talk about next week's class, because it's actually kind of a special format that's happening. It's going to be a panel, but there's a networking event that's happening directly following the event. And Dr. Brown is going to be introducing our guests. So it's really going to be a lot of people, really fun in the Katie Murphy Amphitheater. So make sure that you come prepared mentally for a little bit of a networking, and maybe you'll actually meet some great alumni who could be a good connection for you for summer internships or spring internships. The week following that, Nicole Loro is joining us from Macy's. She's going to be talking to us from a more planning perspective. I know I said this last week, for those of you who hate math, who think they hate Excel, we're going to talk a little bit about Excel for designers and what would be useful to know, and what would be useful to know about reading selling reports on a weekly basis from a creative standpoint, not from a business standpoint, like what it means to read these documents and what these numbers mean, so that you can be a more thoughtful and intelligent designer as you are out in the workforce. And then we're having a bridal wear designer, Panina Tornai, join us. Actually, she has a fashion show happening this Thursday night. If you are looking for a fashion critique place to go, I could maybe get you an invite to that. So let me know. I'm planning to attend myself. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday evening. So shoot me a note if you're thinking that you have no other ideas for your fashion critique. She should be really interesting. And then on November 6th, Nell Diamond, who's the founder of Hill House Home of nap dress fame, will be joining us. So we have a great lineup. That's just the next couple of weeks. Take us through. Super grateful to Chelsea for being flexible with us and joining our roster last minute this semester. But at a young age, Chelsea Maxine Agawa knew she wanted to be a fashion designer. Today, she's the VP of Design, a textile waste artist, and Masters of Science candidate for sustainable fashion. Chelsea's journey has been treasured with art, travel, design, success, and continuing education. Working in the industry as a professional commercial apparel designer for the last decade, she has designed ready-to-wear apparel for major retailers and department stores. As a Fashion Institute of Technology alumna with a specialization in knitwear, sweaters, she has designed across many categories, including cut and sew knits, wovens, and has overseen swimwear design and development. As a seasoned designer and a head of design, she builds color stories, concept, and trend direction for different brands. It's been important for Chelsea to continue pursuing her love of the complex fashion industry, both professionally and personally. She's recently ventured into an art practice and study as a textile waste artist while pursuing higher education. Chelsea aspires to merge her executive experience as a fashion professional with her personal values. Outside of her professional career, she is a leader and a volunteer in different organizations. She is a textile waste advocate, working to reduce waste in textiles by supporting the local organization Fab Scrap, through being an active volunteer sorter and as a 2020 and 2021 independent fundraiser. In 2021, she joined the Fashion Revolution USA team as the co-regional coordinator and co-lead for the tri-state area in New York. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, please. And I'm going to move over to your screen if you want to talk a little bit about your work before we dive in.
Sure.
Interview.
My website can be found on my LinkedIn profile on, oh my God, I forgot your name.
Professor Gordon.
Professor
Yeah.
Gordon, PowerPoint deck, but if anybody wants to take a look, feel free to look. I've broken it down, as you can see here on the left side, by fashion, textiles, sustainability, and my professional work. Honestly, I think the students that are coming out of design schools now actually have much more beautiful representations of their work, because when I graduated, you weren't required to have a digital portfolio or required to have a physical portfolio. So this is kind of just a collection of my work. So on sort of this home page is sort of fashion projects for anybody that's ever interviewed for a company. Especially when you're kind of going into the next steps of your career, you will be asked to create projects. So something, for example, from this project, this was a project I did for a juniors company. And they were, juniors company, meaning young, 18 to probably 25, customer base, body and fit. And they wanted me to join their athleisure athletic wear department. And so at the time, it was really what I found from my research when I was researching the juniors market was I saw a lot of sets. And so they really ended up loving this project. So that's, and I hate to admit that I kind of hate projects, but you will have to do them. You're gonna have to dedicate a lot of time, because what is hard about when you are having to do projects and apply for jobs when you're working full time is you have to go to work. You to go home and make a project for another company. But they're extremely important. They will make or break whether or not you get a job. I've seen really great projects from other people, but you might not get the job because they might not necessarily be brand relevant. And then in sort of the textiles, this is, I kind of just have put in some of this personal work that I've done with artists, workshops, etc., that was related to textiles. So this was a zero waste weaving project that I did with an artist who I think used to have a shop in Brooklyn. Her name was Cynthia Alberto, and she teaches and had a weaving shop out of Brooklyn. And then in the sustainability, this is kind of work that I've been doing. Let's see what's probably the most interesting. This could be interesting. So in my master's program, I'm studying sustainable fashion, and this was a project where we had to act as if we were the CSO, so Chief of Sustainability Officer. And so in sort of these projects that I'm doing in my master's program, you're going in deeper into these companies and reading their annual reports, finding out what their public information is to be able to assess and then come up with sort of suggestions. And then at least everything that I do, I try to make it as brand relevant as possible. That lends itself from having a design eye and a design background where, I've seen other projects for people, they may not necessarily have the vision for what a new sustainability program could be, but they may not necessarily have the lens of a design eye for that. And then to show some of my professional work, this is could be. I should have looked at this myself actually before I came in here. So the company that I'm currently working at is a sweater manufacturing company. We do wholesale business with large retailers in the US. But all of our production is based out of China. But prior to this, I was working at a licensing company called Earthbound. And when I started at Earthbound, I was actually working in their plus size business. So this is some of sort of the product that I developed while my time at Earthbound. And so sometimes the way that I separate my professional, sometimes you have to sign an NDA. So that's why my professional work is protected by a password. So when I do interview, I will share my password with those people. Obviously, if you guys need the password, reach out. Professor Gordon has it as well. And this is kind of just to show obviously when you're interviewing somebody that's a little bit more entry level versus somebody more senior, the work is going to look different. So even if I were to go into one of these other, let's see what's in here. Oh, this is kind of nice too. But I like to see when you get into the more professional part and you have a background, people like to see product. Obviously, like, you also want to show that you're able to make tech packs, you're able to sketch, you're able to, research. But people really gravitate towards beautiful imagery of product that you actually make. So that's why if you were to go through a lot of my professional work, you'll see sort of live public images that have come from whether Instagram or the company's website. I think that's sometimes some of the best iterations. I do try to back some of that work with sort of sketches and to show, but I guess to walk you through some of my time at Macy's. As a company, I don't know if anybody has been to trade shows here, but it could be a good, interesting.
Yeah, how many people have been to a trade show? Just
Yeah.
Paloma?
Which trade show did you guys
Got
get?
to do that.
We went to Corey and
Oh.
also Magic here and also Vegas.
Oh, that one was really good. I went to a talk at Coterie. Very huge, very big, huge.
I heard it was great attendance this year too at Coterie. I
Yeah,
didn't make it over myself, but
yeah. And I thought I've never been to Coterie before this year because
Yeah.
usually Coterie is more for people who are looking to do wholesale business. And when you're in design, you don't really have to show up for Coterie unless you're looking to seek business. Which a lot of the companies I've already worked for, they've already have their businesses established with their business partners. I typically go to trade shows such as Spin Expo, which is a sweater yarn expo with mills and factories. And I also go to Tex World, which is huge and free to students. And honestly, I think if you're just an industry person, you can access Tex World. They have really great talks. They do a really large exhibition that you can kind of just go and see what the trends that they're forecasting are for. Then another one that I go to is PV in New York, which is small, and PV I think is not as interesting as it used to be in my personal perspective. I think it's just really large in Europe, which when I was a student, I got to actually see. And to me, PV was kind of like the coterie of New York. So anyways, long-winded story too. When I was at my time at Macy's, and I know the business structure is probably a little different, and you'll probably hear more from your guest speaker that'll be coming in a couple of weeks. But when I worked at Macy's, we all had these private brands, and so I designed for specifically one of the private brands. But across the private brands, you didn't speak to each other really. But we were sort of inspired by Spin Expo, and I reached out to a high executive level person to allow me to bring all the sweater designers together and create sort of a Spin Expo within the company. So that actually turned out to be really successful. And that's some of the sort of imagery that you're seeing here, where, we were taking sort of concepts and yarns that we were sourcing and building stories that were in line with our brand. And then I should add pictures of the other brands, but when you kind of walked through the room with the other brands, you saw different brand identities. Because what happened at the time was that, if something's really trendy, everybody's going to go after that, right? And it's just who gets to have that item when you're a large retailer like Macy's. So that was really cool. And then, I do a lot of trend reporting in my work. And so that's kind of like what this is, where, you gather close-up imagery of yarns.
How would you start doing a trend recap? Like, where do you, like, what's your
Yeah.
process?
Well, so I'm actually working on that right now, and it's a lot of research, I would say. I mean, I go to the stores every week. not necessarily to buy product, but just to see what's on there. That I think is always really relevant, but we do use resources like WGSN, in terms of trend. And then there are other like more free resources like Tag Walk. There's another one called, that I like to use, Fashion Snoops. So it's really like a combination of all of those things. And I remember when I was first introduced to trend forecasters, it's kind of like, how do you navigate that? Because they're giving you all the trends that are out there in the world. And also too, they also come at different timelines. So WDSN might give you a forecast for 2025 and you only need to design for 2024. So, you know, it's basically, how do I start? I start with a lot of research. And then with that, and then I usually really analyze what's happening in the retail market. And so that's the competitive shopping that I'm talking about. And when I say I'm going out often, I really pick those things that are probably going to be more at the forefront of the key item business. And then that's more of like on the key item trend perspective. I use more of like WGSN and Fashion News to help me project, and the trade shows to help me project color and color vision. And then recently, like at my new company, like we got to go to Europe. So now I'm also taking trends from Europe alongside continuing to shop in New York and just seeing what's different or what do I think might actually stick. I do think a lot of like trend reporting and there's two different things. There's trend reporting and having a vision, right? And having a vision and being able to build a concept, I feel like that's more of like a gut thing. And I think with design, I don't know how much, is this a mix of design and not design?
The majority of the room is design, but there's definitely some other
Yeah.
FBM business students in the room and marketing. Yeah, what do you, international trade?
Yeah, I think like, at least in the design perspective, I do feel like it is very much of a gut feeling of whether or not you're gonna be right. But you know, it takes experience, time to also learn how business works, especially in fashion, and like what type of brand you're working. So I've worked anywhere from Walmart to Macy's, and a Macy's customer is always, they always say is like later. So it's, you know, you learn a lot and you kind of have to, you know, read your sales reporting, read what's working. You know, Walmart is a very retail conscious customer, right? So we could be super trendy, but if you have a high retail, you may not sell to them. So it's a lot of understanding your business, understanding your brand identity, and then also just kind of you are leading that sort of vision and design decisions to basically make product for them.
It's great.
Did I
Thank
answer
you.
that question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I guess my other question would be, when you go on an interview, is this what you're doing? Are you showing this as your portfolio, or do you show it in some other way? And talk about what that process looks like when you're talking about your work.
Definitely. Let's see what's first on here. Okay, so just more like previous work, and I had redone these. This is not how we actually did it at Macy's. This was kind of just like
Your take.
my take on trying to show. I'm like, I haven't touched this in a while, but this was my at the time take on building sort of my brand identity at the time and pitching that to my potential employers. When it comes to how do I prepare for an interview and how do I utilize my website? My background, my specialization is in knitwear, and then, but I have done cut and sew, wovens, and basically it depends on what I'm interviewing for, right? So I would say probably the one where I had to show my portfolio was when I started at Earthbound, and knowing that I was going into a position that needed knits and sweaters, I actually took pieces of this work into a smaller capsule that I felt they would resonate with. So I think in general, it's always important to keep your portfolios up to date as possible, or have your work ready to work with, because some people, I'll tell you, when you go on an interview, they're not going to need or want the long-winded story of your history or what you could do. they may want to, and you know, you may not be ready with hand sketches or flat sketches, or you might not be ready with a tech back, but you can always deliver that later. I try to always have those things, if possible, in a separate PDF that I could open up. I definitely, like I said, it's when I graduated, you have to have a physical portfolio. Not everybody does everything digitally. And personally, I think digital is fine. So if anybody, and when you get to interviewing, I'm a big fan of digital. And only thing I don't like though is I've had somebody show up to me with a full computer. And I was like, ooh, this is rough. But that was, I mean, that's just like what happens too is like you'll meet a bunch of different people who have different personal things that they want to see or don't see. And
So you prefer an iPad?
I prefer like an
Yeah,
iPad or
yeah.
like a Surface or something
Yeah.
that's more of like easier to swipe through, like as if you were flipping through pages. Some people like a clear brand identity across your work. And what's interesting for me, and the reason why I will take bits and pieces from different parts of my portfolio is because I think I haven't really had enough time to build a brand identity across that seems like seamless, so to say. And I also like, it was much later on in my career where I even developed a personal brand logo, right? So to go back in all of my work, I think if that's something that you could walk away from in school and start developing how you want that to be seen now, I think that's really key. But that's why I take sort of like a mix of my work and then take the pieces that I think they're gonna be interested in.
That's I've never heard that piece of advice before, but that sounds really wise.
Yeah.
To kind of, even if you don't plan to launch your own business right away, kind of make your own stand, make your own brand logo, take your work from FIT even, and make sure that it kind of all reflects the same thing and collect it throughout your career.
Yeah.
It's a great.
And I think that's probably one of the things that I think I've struggled with, but in like a good way, right? Like I think it's design, I don't know, I mean, I think my creative thing is that I just think of too many things at once or too many, and everything. And because of the type of companies that I worked for, it's a lot of things you always have to pick, or a lot of things that you like. But when you start to work too, you also have you're always going to have your personal take on things, but you also have to do what's right for the business, right? So that's something that you kind of learn on the job. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of times where I've designed things that I don't like. And then there's just tons of times where I design things that I love. But if I take kind of back to kind of my homepage, which to me personally, like I'll show you another project that I worked on. I feel like it's a very different take to that juniors project that I was showing you guys. But part of that is also because I needed to reach a different customer. I was reaching a different company. Their vision was different and it was different product. And so that was kind of my reasoning for also kind of just taking bits and pieces of my work and only showing what I think they're going to want to see. Because you may not have a lot of time when you're on these interviews and you don't know how many people are going to interview you, but I would be ready with what you think is definitely best for them.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah.
I think that's a great precursor, and now I can dive into all my questions.
Let me move that way.
Sure, yeah, sure. I'm gonna switch my chair over slightly. Great, well, you kind of highlighted a lot of your career path by looking at this, but I wonder if you could just talk us through your whole journey from FIT to now and how you made each step.
Sure. So I started my career at Macy's. When I was at FIT, I don't know what they're teaching you now, but when I was at FIT, one of my professors said, get a job at Macy's, you could get a job anywhere. And at least for me, I feel like that's been very true, at least in my career path. I spent 6 years at Macy's and I grew. I got to start in knitwear and sweaters. So if there's any other future knitwear specializations. And I loved it. But opportunity for growth, to go from an assistant to an associate, I needed to move categories. And so that's how I started designing cut and sew, back to sweaters, and then into wovens. And I really appreciated that experience, one, for the growth, but also, my long-term career was to get to a director VP position. And when you're at the director VP position, you're going to be overseeing a lot of product categories. And so not necessary, not saying that you can't do it, but not to pigeonhole myself and to, grow, make more money, do well at a company. I let go of wanting to hold on to sweaters to learn something new. And then after Macy's, I moved on to a wholesale company. So I think department store to wholesale. I'm not sure if any of these I will say that when I was a student, none of these concepts would have resonated with me, but if you've had internships, maybe you are familiar with some of these wholesalers. Like wholesalers are like G3, Golden Touch. And so these people sort of work for brands such as Macy's, a Walmart. They design product, they buy products. So that's kind of, whereas in Macy's, we developed direct private label and worked with these wholesalers. And then when I moved into wholesale, though, I was able to be the head of design for their cut and sew knits business. So that's when I really got to own color concept and trend vision and then lead a larger team. And then I also got to do jackets and bottoms there. And then COVID happened, lost my job. And it was a blessing in disguise, to be honest with you, because that lady was mean.
Where were you?
It was, so she, unfortunately, after I think little less than a year, her business actually got like bought out by her partners and kind of just went under. But the company was called Allison Andrews, or Allison Miller. Like a clothing LLC. So when the wholesalers, they kind of either name it after themselves or some sort of like a G3,
Yeah.
She's still in the industry, but she doesn't own her own company anymore. But I spent COVID really enjoying my time. I made mass, which was really nice, and figuring out what I was gonna do, which kind of also led me to wanting to apply for my master's. And then, but in early 2021, I went to a juniors company doing that was the project that was showing you, doing athleisure athletic wear in the knits category, stayed there for a short period of time. I was there as a senior designer working with, and that was also really interesting because in wholesale, your job is always going to be really different. I was a senior designer, but I worked kind of on my own, yet we were part of a bigger team. So that was kind of different than what I had experienced prior. And then after that, I was 2 years at a licensing company called Earthbound, where our largest business partner was Walmart. And so we designed for Walmart brands. And we were kind of acting as their design arm. So we didn't actually produce anything, but we designed everything that they were putting on their line. And then about 3 months ago, I started my current position at the sweater factory.
Right. Very cool. Thank you. How did you get that first job out of school?
Yeah.
At Macy's.
Yeah. So I mean, there are still a lot of agencies now, but my first job at Macy's was through an agency. It was a staffing company called Atrium Staffing. And they, at the time when I graduated, I applied through Style Careers, Indeed. LinkedIn didn't have the sort of job postings that they had, but I did interview directly with companies, and it also worked with agencies. Earlier on in my career, I found that agencies were always easier to at least get the interview. And the way the agency works, they kind of get a commission for filling the role. But they got me my first interview at Macy's. But it was interesting because they sent me to Macy's for a position that I wasn't actually even qualified for. It was like an associate level and I was a new graduate. But the interview went so well with that director that she recommended me for another open sweater position that happened to be at the company.
Oh, wow.
And then what was also interesting, I don't know if they still do this, but it was temp to perm. So I was a temp for 3 months and then they offered me the full-time position after that.
That's great. Which I feel like probably is more likely to happen through an agency.
Yeah.
Or a recruiter or an agency. Which is another, we've talked a little bit about LinkedIn, but it's always good to make those connections on LinkedIn too, because sometimes they have opportunities that aren't widely posted and they can kind of get your foot in the door, to your point. So can you talk to us about your kind of overarching process? So kind of two main time periods. The first would be like, what does an average week look like for you? And then the second being, how do you actually plan out like an entire season and how does that flow through for you?
Yeah, that one's, what's really interesting about this question right now is the company I work for is a small company, and then I've worked for large retailers where in large retailers, people will have time and action calendars set up for you. They will train you on how the cycle of your development works. But being in the position that I'm at now, smaller, but also an executive leadership position, I have to build out that calendar. That didn't exist. So I'm kind of like, right now I'm
Working on it.
I'm working on
Which
it.
is hard.
It's
Building a
hard.
calendar for multiple teams that are already operating is a really hard thing to do. It's like turning the Titanic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one, this team didn't have it, so they were kind of just flying by the seat of their pants this whole time. And prior to me starting, the person that got me the position, she'd only been there for 2 years, and so this company has only had a design team for a little over 2 years. And what's also interesting, I currently work in sweaters, which is now becoming an all year round business, whereas before it was very seasonal. So in terms of how does the development calendar look like, depending on the type of category that you're working on, it actually can also look different. I don't necessarily know if that answers the question.
Well, like a typical week flow, like is there anything that you typically do on Mondays and then?
Yeah, okay.
Question looks different for everyone in
Yeah.
different areas of the business. But.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, can I go by it by month and hopefully that'll get me
Yeah.
down to my week? Okay.
Yeah.
In the wholesale business, you usually will have markets, and markets are basically when buyers come and they either want to see your line, they want to develop new products with you, or they want to just pick stuff in your showroom and put it directly into their line, right? So on a monthly basis, when you're working wholesale, and especially as the designer or the direct design director, the head of that category, you have to be ready with new product or new vision every month. And that I will say is tough. But this current company, I do expect buyers to come in the beginning of the month and the end of the month. So that is what I plan for generally. And then in terms of like, how does that reflect my week? I guess that's actually a good way to answer it, because that will dictate what my workflow needs to be. Because if I have buyer requests and they're writing orders and I need to give them colors, or I need to give them new trims, or I need to give them, that will dictate my week, because that's priority over development. But there'll also be, these buyers don't work on the same timelines, right? So if Francesca's asking me to put in development and I need samples by 10/13, I also need to make sure that I figure out how to not only get my Marmax customer what they need to finish their buy, and also make sure that me and my team have enough time and are agile enough to get development to the factory so that those samples come in time. So my weeks are not like systematic at all right now, but I would like to get there, because when you work like at a company like Macy's, you kind of always know what's going on. You always have your production, you're probably working on a spring production, but you're working on winter development, and then you're in the middle of a buy for summer. Like, but you kind of know that. And whereas currently what I'm doing now, or like on the wholesale side, most wholesalers don't have their design teams need to manage production. And usually when there's an issue, then you might have to be involved with production. But most of the time when I've worked in wholesale or at the licensing company, I got to focus more on design and design development, which is actually kind of nice.
That's great. Very cool. What do you feel like has been the most fulfilling part of your career so far? In design.
I don't know, can I see a show of hands how many design people are here? Yay! And yay to everybody else too. But I really love what I do. And like, I know it's super corny, but when they say if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work, it's true. That's what I think has been probably the most fulfilling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. What about most challenging?
Oh, this is a great question, because I think kind of as I was introduced, I'm in my master's program. studying sustainable fashion. And the most challenging thing that I think was part of my career was recognizing and realizing that my personal values didn't match the work that I did. And it's hard because I love what I do. So, you know, I wake up, I go to work every day, I design products for people, whether it's accessible or not. But I also don't really believe in overproduction, overconsumption. And so I'm trying to figure out how to solve for that for at least myself. And it's a journey that I'm not yet done with, but that's probably the toughest thing.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. At what point did you actually decide that you wanted to make a pivot? Was it during COVID or?
I would say COVID was definitely a bigger factor in that, because it gave me the time to think about what I wanted to do. Working professionally and working in design, working in fashion, it's a lot of hours sometimes. And, you know, I think the workplace is changing. I think work-life balance is becoming more important. Mental health is more important than it was when I started my career. But I think, you know, like the job that I was saying that blessing in disguise, like, because I was also, you know, a head of design, I was working, and I chose to work these hours, but I was working 9 to 10, like, that's a lot. So I wasn't coming home thinking about sustainability. So when it was probably really like COVID, where you had time to sit with your thoughts and yourself, and that's definitely probably, but then I didn't actually apply right away because I wasn't sure what it was gonna look like. Cause also, you know, you're not working, so you don't make money, right? So you
Yeah.
like find money to go to school all of a sudden.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about the program that you decided to apply to and what it's like?
Yeah, so I'm at a school called GCNYC, which is Glasgow Caledonian New York College. Their campus is in Soho, and it's a small school, which larger school is part of Glasgow Caledonian University in Scotland. And they also have a UK, like London, campus. And the program that I'm currently in is sustainable fashion. The school at large focuses on common good. So they launched, I don't know where they are at with it, but they launched a DEI program. They have sustainable business programs. The question about tell me.
I was just wondering what the setup is, because you're
Yeah.
working part-time.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm sure some people could go full-time,
Yeah.
right? What those programs look like, how long they take, what you study while you're there.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm part-time because I work full-time. You have the option to go full-time. The school is set up, it's a small school, so you basically know everybody that's there. It's a small cohort of students, but what I really love about that, it really builds community. And when people are going to school for the common good, you're basically chasing after the same thing. And so what's really nice about not only is that community we're all just after the same thing, right? And so it's not competitive, it's very supportive. Things that I'm learning, anywhere from, like right now I'm in a course called QA, quantitative analysis, and I'm learning economics, finance, business. We had a whole business strategy course, so I'm learning strategy, I'm learning leadership, which are things I think you can find in another master's level program, of course, depending on what you're looking to do. And then one of my other favorite courses that I had was called Fashion as Culture, Culture as Fashion, where we really explore and talk about the duality of fashion. And I think for me, and it was also because it was so small, it was so intimate and beautiful, and everybody had really like heartfelt, beautiful work that came out of it. And that's how actually my textile waste art was birthed,
Yeah.
because that was my main project out of that, which I hope to carry through to my thesis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And when should you be finished?
End of next year.
End of 2020, like a year from now, basically. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
actually-
taken you 3 years,
It will 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But I chose to delay it. And then I was gonna remind me to answer the question about full-time.
Yeah.
I chose to delay it because maybe if I was an assistant or associate level, I could probably do the coursework. and not lose my mind. But because I'm at kind of a bit of a higher level, I have larger responsibility with my job that I need to make sure it gets done. And then also I do take my program really seriously. So it's taking 6 credits. It's a lot. It's a lot. But we're through it. We got through our first year. And but I decided that because like now I'm not taking 6 credits, I'm taking 4.5 because I knew I couldn't personally manage the workload anymore and like my mental health and being able to work full time. And then what's also really cool about the program, there are anywhere from Gen Zs to boomers in these programs. And so that's really great for talking about generational differences and thought-provoking ideas. And then, you have people who have no experience and people who do have experience. So then you have really interesting conversations. But which I really wanted to bring that up though, because you can go to the school full time. And I believe that takes about 1.5 years, it should take like less than 2 years.
Oh, okay. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just on this page. So you've worked in cut and sew knits and ready to wear and also swim. I'm just wondering what you feel like the differences and nuances are between the different categories.
Oh, well, so well, if you ever become a knitwear specialization, cut and sew knit should become easy. I think I don't know. I'm not sure if the foundation of the design program here is the same. But I do think it set me up for a lot of success, the way that it was built, because I'm able to do all of these categories. And so when it comes to like, I feel like you learned this at school though, knits are stretchy and easier. You don't need a lot of darts and construction and wovens are more structured and tailored and fit is a little bit important. The way you measure a garment is different. But I would say that the biggest factor about swim really though is fit. Fit is way more critical, I think, because it can show all your flaws, but also if it doesn't fit right, it's not gonna sell. Fits calendar, so seasonal development. There are sometimes too what you'll see in the industry, depending on the way that the company works, because there are people out there that actually just specialize in swim, and people will directly go to there and do all their development with those people. But then you'll be in an experience like mine where they ask the design team to also be responsible for the swim development. And things that we were responsible for was color, print, designs, but then we also leaned on those wholesalers, to the people that were doing the products, to dictate to us what are the correct finishes, to make this a better fit. What kind of cup, what kind of wire, very the most technical category that I think I've actually ever worked on. But sometimes too, you'll meet people, and I met a few people through my network that they'll work on seasonal product. So you might be an outerwear designer half the year and a swimwear designer the other half. So those are kind of interesting differences.
Same for the buyer, I feel like
Yeah.
is often the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that I think is interesting if that's something that you want to do multiple things. It kind of did, I would say it's up to you, because I thought I was going to be in sweaters forever. And luckily I'm in sweaters again.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That worked out.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's anything that you would have done differently here at FIT to prepare yourself for this path that you ended up taking?
Yeah. I probably would have dated different people or broken up with them sooner rather than later. Because I think your personal relationships do kind of like affect, how you are, whether it's in school or kind of after after you graduate. And then I would say more so that, because I'm still a procrastinator to this day, and I don't know how to change that. But if that was something I couldn't change about myself, because I'm still like staying up in the middle of the night, finishing making deadlines, as I was when I was a student, and I just like don't know how to overcome that.
Yeah,
But if that's probably the thing I think I would change.
yeah. Try to work on your deadlines and
Yeah.
get things done faster.
I guess actually, so I was a commuter student when I went here. Probably the only other thing I wish I did was I wish I built more. I mean, I definitely had friends while I was here, but I wish I built more community. I know when you're not a commuter and you kind of live on campus, it's easier to go to clubs, it's easier to hang out on campus, it's easier to stay in the rooms and work and, you know, stay with other people that are staying and working. That's probably the only other thing I
Yeah,
wish I had more time to do, but
that makes sense.
freaking
What was like the best thing you did while you were here?
the best thing? Study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where'd you go?
I went to Nottingham Trent in my senior year, and then I went to Polymota in my sophomore year. Yeah,
So you went twice,
I
wow,
went twice.
that's great.
Yeah.
What would you say to recommend the two, or you know, what were those programs like?
Well, Nottingham Trent, for anybody that is interested in doing knitwear, I do highly recommend. Although I mean, I guess because Polymota is basically built by FIT, right? So they're building out a curriculum that is related to what your coursework is supposed to be like here. And that I think was nice because it kept it in line with what I needed to work on. And then when I went to Trent, I'm convinced that the British are just teach very differently. And this is which is fine, but that was very different for me because I came from a really structured background. So, you know, it's probably a lot more like a Parsons where they let you, you know, really experiment. And that was like really hard for me when I went to Trent, but they're a really good knitwear program. Um, and it was interesting because I remember too what they told me that if you go, I don't know if it's still like this now, but they told me at FIT, if you go to Trent, you may not be able to use the auto knitting badge, which is like the stoles, because you don't learn that program while you're away. But I made it a point to learn that program while I was there. And when I came back and I was like, listen, I can program, I can't do it anymore. I was like, I could program my knitting. And so they let me, I had to work a little bit closer with the technicians downstairs, but that allowed me to not necessarily like pigeonhole myself into something I couldn't do because, but luckily they told me that up front and I made it a point not to be able to do that when I got back.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's great. So you spoke a little bit about the trends reports that you've been pulling. What do you feel like are the biggest trends right now that you've been trying to capitalize on?
Yeah. All I think about is sweaters these days. And I was honestly, everywhere I go, I'm like, oh my God, that's a nice sweater. That's a nice sweater. And I want to take pictures of everybody's sweater.
That time of year,
It's
they're
that
all
time of
coming
year.
out.
Yeah. So like I said, like what was interesting is that at least when I was at Macy's, right? You basically, the majority of your workload was fall holiday. And then in spring, summer, you get a break. I'm in a sweater company now. I don't have a break. And but in terms of trends, sorry, to stay focused. In terms of trends, probably things bright color, like at least in Europe, things that are saying bright colors. And what's really popular right now is the sort of like three-dimensional embroideries and motifs on, you know, not just like your sort of jersey sweater, but also like uh lofty stitches, like shaker stitches and whatnot. And then something I thought was interesting, you know, especially too at my level, I am listening to I'm doing a lot of research. I'm going to a lot of these trend forecasters and seeing what they have to foresee, and you kind of really just end up having to pick what it is that means something to you and your brand or the company that you're working for. But one of the interesting things I heard recently at a trend forecast was hairy yarns are back, meaning like your mohair and your yak over the cashmeres. And to me, like, I think that was like, because at least I don't know, when you work in commercial apparel, so like when I say commercial apparel, it's not your mass market, but it is more your mass market. It's like kind of that accessible categories. And the thing that buyers, designers, product developers are like, it needs to be softer, it needs to be softer. And I think part of it is also because of the sustainability aspects that people know things like softeners are in their garments, chemicals and whatnot. Those are the things that make it softer and nicer. But I think that I thought was an interesting concept or new trend that is coming through.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I don't know, do we have a question?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not designing, but I know you were asked earlier, but if you could, of all the sort of resources that are online for forecasting, which one is your favorite?
I would say my favorite one is WGSN because they're the most robust. I mean, things that are accessible and free, Fashion Soups offers a lot in terms of publications.
Yeah. How many of you have used WGSN? Pretty much everyone, and how about Fashion Soups? Few. Now, both of them are available to you for free on the library. So if you're not aware how to do that, even if you aren't a designer or if you're going to be a buyer or whatever, any field within FIT, you can use this. So if you don't know how to use it, let me know and I can make sure that I show you how. It's nice to have it for free when you're here because you have to start paying for it when you leave.
Yeah, definitely use it while you have it for free and learn how to use it because once you get into the industry, right, you can't just look at everything that's pretty, right? You know, you gotta start to take focus on what it is. But the more that you learn how to use it, the more you also know how to navigate it once you actually get to the point where you need to use it.
Definitely. It's great. Where's been your favorite place to work?
Oh, this one's a hard question.
There's like different reasons why.
There's
each place, right?
Yeah, because like it's like I have a love-hate relationship with all the companies that I've worked for different reasons. I mean, it's interesting because like especially early on in my career, I loved a company like Macy's because, you know, we're working for a corporate company, is great benefits, it's great community, good culture, like work
Great way to
culture,
learn.
great way to learn.
Yeah.
You know, they have, I don't know if they still have this, but they had an executive development program. So, you know, you go in there and you can, although you don't need to be responsible for it, but you learn things about like how the buyers do their buys and what these reporting is, you know, how to read a report, how to understand sales. So like you don't get that at a small wholesale company. But then what's interesting now, being on a small wholesale company now, I have, right now, luckily I have work-life balance. But I don't have a micromanager. I get to do what I want, basically, which is also nice. But then there's also like, and I worked for other small companies where they are micromanagers. You can't make your own decisions. And I mean, some of that too, right? It's like the culture of the people that are there, with whoever becomes your manager. Because at one of the companies I actually worked for, like I worked for an evil woman once, and then I worked for a micromanager. And I would come home to my boyfriend. I was like, honestly, I would rather work for somebody who was mean to me and let me do what I want versus having to do everything and anything for a person that
Another person.
I liked, but I just had to do it because you know, I guess like for me, micromanagement was more of like, it really, you know, when you can't make a decision anymore, it really affects like how you feel as a designer, I think.
Yeah. Second guessing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel like you had to lean on your network to move yourself forward?
To move
Or to find a
myself,
job?
no, so this is actually really interesting because to move myself forward, not necessarily, but I do think having built my own presence as a designer within these companies, half of my career, or really the early half of my career, was through more agency. I got a lot of help from the agencies, and that's how I got, you know, interviews, phone calls, whatever. But the second half of my career have all been referrals. People coming to me saying, "Are you looking because I need to fill this position?" Or like, "I'm leaving. I need you to like, you're the only person I could think of to fill this position." So it's not necessarily that I've leaned on other people to get roles, but making sure that although leaving a company is really hard to do, and like you shouldn't burn your bridges, but you also don't know what that's going to look like. But I think being, you know, showing your talent, what you could do, and professionalism, people are going to gravitate towards you. So less so me needing to lead on my network, but my network seeking me. And I guess I wasn't really, I don't know, it's been really nice.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I mean, obviously you've made some hires through that years. What do you look for in a potential hire? Especially an entry level hire.
An entry level, definitely look for a positive attitude. I think, especially now that I am working with younger people, some of the things I have noticed is, and also, I mean, I get it. Look, I'm struggling with, you know, my personal values and doing the work that I do. And like, you know, we are seeking work-life balance and all this stuff. But, you know, business is business, right? And to come with a positive attitude, and sure, sometimes you're not gonna wanna do something silly, but like somebody's gotta do it. And I guess like, I don't know, I feel like some of the younger people that I've worked with lately, they're a little exhausted. And I'm like, you haven't even like gone through it yet. You haven't even gone through the thick of it. And I just wish they just kind of had a much more positive attitude around, and like, you can't help certain circumstances of other people that are challenging. And so that's always really like interesting, because it's not so much I'm the problem, but it might be our managers that are the problem. You know, like these micromanagers or these people who you don't necessarily like, just like their attitude in general. So I would say like positive attitude, you know, I mean, talent, of course. There are people that I think that have talent, but don't really know what to do with it, or really refine it. Yeah.
That's great. What do you feel like are I mean, maybe this is answering the same question, but what do you feel like makes a great designer? Like, what are important qualities that would launch someone into
Yeah.
the all-time best hire space?
Yeah, I think probably kind of also like to your point answers the previous question, but willingness to learn I think is also extremely important, because you know I've I've grown in my career at this point too, right? And some of the younger people that I also kind of sort of mentor that want larger positions or promotions or whatever, and like you're not always going to be ready for a position that you're going after, whether you're interviewing for it, whether you're getting promoted for it. But you have to be willing to learn, because otherwise you're just gonna sink, right? So willingness to learn, and then that's a big one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a big one for sure. Never stop learning.
yeah, never stop learning.
Great. Well, so at the beginning of the semester, we kind of pulled together 3 questions that we wanted to ask all of our guests, and our capstone questions. And our first one is, looking back on your journey, what do you think is the most important decision you made in your career, and why?
Most important, I would say one, following my dreams. But that's not so much in my like career aspect.
Yeah.
But I would say something I really learned from was leaving companies. Um, and I mean that in a good way, so to say, because I also, one, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what's right for you, the decisions you have to make, and the circumstances of the companies you work for, the people you work for are always going to be different. And I feel like something I learned, I spent a lot of time at Macy's, and I just like, I didn't want to leave. But I saw things like my loyalty to the company wasn't going to get me another job somewhere else. And I also learned that I was replaceable. And because businesses need to keep business going. And like I said, I mean, like that's a good thing. That's okay. But I wouldn't have gotten leadership positions in other companies if I didn't learn that. And like I remember too, when I was trying to leave Macy's, it took me a good like year and a half before I actually got a position. And then by the time I did get a position, I got 2 offers, and then I was lucky enough to have to decide between 2 offers. But you know, that was actually, yeah, like leaving and going through the interview processes and learning what people are asking me for, because also like, how do you pitch yourself to these people? And I remember like my first interview, I screwed up with a company, and it was because I was just so loyal to somebody else who wasn't necessarily like in the long run technically loyal to me back, because they didn't fight for me back or wanted me to stay. You know, and then they just kind of hire into your role after that. And like, that's okay, because then it also allowed me to keep moving on and go into different positions and to confidently leave future positions too.
Yeah. Yeah. So like an eye opener.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is one of the greatest challenges that's facing the industry today?
Sustainability.
Yeah. Seems like you're trying to figure that piece out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you mentioned Dr. Brown, and I think that was actually probably another key part in my sustainability journey, because when I went to Polymoda, Dr. Brown was the academic lead for that program. And so when I took this course, I got to take it in Italy, and she really curated a lot of sustainable designers, artists, and other industry professionals, of course, too. But those were the people that always stuck to me
Yeah.
because that, I don't know, you'll get stuck to whoever inspires you, right? And I think kind of unknowingly, I kind of always was interested in sustainability. It just took me this long to do something about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think those are all the questions for me, but I'm sure there are some more out there, so toss it to the room.
I was late, but I didn't hear the beginning, and I just want to ask you, where are you now?
So I'm at a sweater company, a wholesaler called Shantex Group. We manufacture out of China. Our biggest brands are Marmax, so TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Francesca's, Lulu's, Boston Proper, Tilly's. So another interesting thing about being on the wholesale side, you work with a lot of brands. I've done Bloomingdale's, I've done Ross, Burlington.
Costco?
I haven't done any Costco, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Because especially now that I've done Walmart, you think I would do Costco.
Right. That's one out there that I feel like from an apparel standpoint, it's always like, wait, what? You sold to Costco?
Yeah,
I sold to Costco for 2 different companies.
I believe it.
It's crazy. It's gotta be kind of hard for you to balance learning about sustainable fashion and being passionate about that, but also working for a company who's clearly not working
Yeah.
in a sustainable fashion. Have you been able to get anything?
That's part of my, not yet, because I'm still learning about the position I'm in the company that I work for. Because the other thing, the hardest part I find in sustainability and fashion is getting your buyers on board. Because yes, you can make design decisions, but design decisions might cost money and your buyers might not be willing to pay for it, right? So there's like a fine sort of story and line that you're trying to do. And like also something we're talking about in my program right now, like greenwashing and green hushing, now people aren't talking about the sustainability things that claims that they're actually doing, or, they're not promoting their recycled yarns or whatever, because now it's really just companies are just kind of intending to do it on the back end now. So green hushing is a new sort of sustainability trend that I'm just hearing about, learning about. So where I'm at now, I'm not so sure how I'm gonna implement it into the company, or if I'm gonna have to decide to leave. But because the other thing is too is like, I'm looking at my buyers and their product, I'm going to their stores, and I'm like, I don't want to just put another label on this thing made with recycled material. Like that's, what does that really mean, right? So I'm not quite there yet. But that's what I'm trying to do.
Trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure out, like, I mean, I've talked to my team, I'm like, do we do a sustainable line? But also, like, I think too, being in this program, what does a sustainable line actually look like?
Yeah,
Is not the same thing that I'm trying to do.
right.
So that's definitely it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge.
Yeah. Let's start in the back room today.
What's the most important thing you learned from FIT?
Oh,
Interesting?
important.
Important? Oh, important.
I loved everything about my time at FIT. When I left FIT, I felt extremely knowledgeable about tech packing, measuring garments, etc., and being strong in knitwears. And so like a lot of the technical aspects of what I learned here, I think really was extremely important. But I think sort of more like inspiration, I guess. I think the thing that I learned at FIT that I was still, trying to learn, like, really own now is believing in myself. And I was really fortunate to have professors that, although they didn't necessarily like push me to believe in myself, but they pushed me to challenge my work. Especially in my senior year, because like I actually got both of my looks in the graduate show. And that's because I was pushed, and I was just trying to get one. And like, I feel like that was something I've always known what I wanted to do, and I've always went after that, right? But going after what you want and having drive is very different than believing in yourself. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah.
Well, Amanda H.
Do you have like any inspiration in terms of like a brand or person when it comes to sustainability?
when it comes to sustainability, I mean, like, I feel like this is a cheesy answer, but I feel like Eileen Fisher is like, just has been leading the way like for a long time. And so when it comes to at least like Eileen Fisher, but I would say like in terms of like, to me, that's more of like business practice and business model. So that's a brand that I would seek um, as an inspiration to understand what are sustainability practices and business models that we should be going after. When it comes to sustainable design, I think I lean more towards just like localization in general. So people that use dead stock that make smaller production runs, and because obviously I love design, I love designers, and like I would buy from a smaller designer who only produces like 100 pieces. And to me though, although might not necessarily be their brand might not necessarily be sustainable, but my perspective on that, it is sustainable because they're not overproducing, they're only making quantity runs that they need to do. And
Just in case people aren't aware, can you explain what you mean by dead stock?
yes, so dead stock material is just not making new material. So when you're working for like a company, like any brand, Macy's, Walmart, whatever, and you need jersey fabric, knit jersey fabric, they're going to the mills and making that fabric for you for your production. Dead stock is either leftover materials, fabric that's already like in the factories or on the factory floor that's not used up. And dead stock comes from anywhere, like if, during COVID, everybody was canceling orders, right? So that meant production stopped. And that meant all of these large, rolls of fabric still existed. And so that is what dead stock is. It's stock fabric or material that is not being used.
So in that case, it makes it so that you have to be a little bit more flexible on your end use units because you're not Macy's being like, okay, I need to make 100,000 units of X. And I need the fabric to make 100,000 units,
Like it might run out.
right, exactly.
And also like in a more traditional design, like large retailer, you're designing the fabric or you're designing the new color. When you use dead stock fabric, you're picking color that already exists. Like, so if WGSN is telling you that like red hot is gonna be the next big trend, but you might not be able to get that on the market because it might not be any dead stock there. Or if you wanna chase after a pink, you might only get like pastel pink versus Barbie pink because Barbie pink still needs to be produced, but nobody wants pastel pink anymore. So it can, when working with dead stock material, it can be limiting to your design decisions.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
What do you think were the advantages of studying creatively at Trent versus here? Because Trent's pretty relaxed.
Yeah, learning how to just kind of do my own thing. Because but that's in a good way. Like I think they really pushed having like more of a creative vision. And like I said, like here it was a lot more structured, right? Like so you knew what you had to get done for next week. You learn how to pattern make a gusset, and next week you had to bring in a gusset skirt, right? And I mean, when I went to Trent, I did go in my senior year. So at that point anyway, you're really developing your concept and your thesis. But that was probably, I think, and I'm glad that I got to do that, although it was really hard for me. Because what was weird about it was, like I said, like by the time I got back to New York and I was working on my thesis, this is very different than what I thought it was gonna be. And even to this day, I'm still kind of just like, wow, how did that happen? But I think part of that is also because I went to Trent, right? Because I had to be pushed to think differently and work differently. I don't know if I would say that I used kind of what I learned from there kind of throughout my career, so to say. But in terms of like, I think this was probably the other thing I was thinking about. What's going to be really important when you sort of enter your career and you grow in your career is developing a vision. And like kind of like that brand identity that I was kind of talking about in the beginning of the class, because I've worked with other designers whose vision doesn't necessarily sit with the brand identity, and that can be really challenging. But I think like that, maybe that's probably the thing that I did take away from like Trent, was being able to develop my own vision kind of without sort of the support that I needed.
Has there been a particular experience or moment that reinforced your commitment to reducing textiles?
I would say my textile start. I know I didn't get to show it because it's actually on a different page. And that's been really fun. I'm not really sure where it's gonna go, but I really hope that it's something larger or it's something that I really focus on. But you know, and like things that it came out of that is I started doing a lot of fabric collages, started doing sort of fabric paintings. Another thing I'm working on that I'm also trying to do in my research class, our clothes are made of plastic that people don't know that acrylic fibers, polyester fibers, these are all just like plastic fibers. And so I did a couple years ago, I was actually back at FIT doing the couture sewing embellishments class. And so I did a small project where I took swatches and I embellished plastic fiber names on them. But using waste, right? Like I guess the idea, and I hope that this again transforms into my thesis, but one of the ideas I have for my thesis is using waste as a form, as a textile waste as a medium. Whether it's kind of, you know, for art or at scale, I'm not really sure what that looks like, but I would say that's probably the project right now and it's really inspiring me.
I just wanted to say how thrilled I am to also connect with another Filipino in the fashion industry. Also, I also thought that it was also like interesting that you were a commuter during your time at FIT. I commute from Long Island. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But I was looking at your portfolio on the way to school, and I noticed that you had a presentation for materialized identity for piña fabric,
Yeah.
which is like pineapple fiber turned into like a textile, and that's basically used for like traditional dress. So I was wondering if you made that for your fashion as culture, culture as fashion program, or was it for something else?
It was for my master's program, but it was a course called Material Considerations. And so the person that led that course is actually an artist. And she really kind of, you know, pushed us to make research questions and think about fibers. You know, I think at FIT you learn about cotton, you learn about counting the stitches and how many wales and stuff like that. And so we did a little bit of that in the program because the program that I'm in is not full of designers or people who have textile backgrounds. And then what I recognized was that something I did, my research question was like, why, what is piña fiber and why don't we know about it? And what was really nice about that was I didn't realize that the things that prevented things about Filipino culture to be sort of globalized was because there were laws that prevented exports of basically anything that was kind of coming out of the Philippines, but one of them being piña fiber. So that came from a course from materialized identity, and like what's really nice about the program that I'm in, they really push you to explore dualities, explore questions that you're thinking about, also pulling in research from why, because I guess like I could have just made a project on piña cloth, right? And let's talk about textiles about piña. But the way that I formulated my question, because how they teach you how to understand research methods, made me somehow put that other part of the question is like, why don't we know about it? So therefore I had to figure out why we didn't know about it, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I know since you're working in wholesale, I wanted to know like what your relationship with production is, because I'm in production management, but I always, I do have that kind of creative side of me, so I kind of like the idea of like, a designer or someone who's like on the more creative side of production, especially in wholesale, and how they like have a relationship with actual production. So it's like, do you have any experiences, or like how do you handle production on your side?
Definitely. That's a great question because when you work for larger retailers like a Macy's or a Walmart, they're actually much more production driven than they are design driven. When you're working at a wholesaler, like a company that I'm working at, or some of the other companies that I talked about, they're a little bit more design driven, and then production's kind of just there in that like production will really take what the designers have to say rather than, I mean, obviously they'll look at color lab divs, they'll approve things, but they really that's also just driven by design too, because color is picked by design. But when I've worked at Macy's and I've worked with Walmart, because the production teams are more involved with sales and sales analytics, right? They might be driving things like color decisions. In terms of how we look at production, it's interesting that I don't review certain things sometimes. But on the wholesale side, like I won't see a print strike off or a color lab dip, and I'm like, I don't know why nobody ever showed. How come I've never seen this? Like, you know, because we might not have a representation in the showroom, and then like it goes into production, and I've actually never seen it out of paper, you know, or off the computer screen. So in terms of in the larger companies, you'll have a better relationship with production. You might actually even be more involved with production because you might be making production decisions. In the wholesale side, it's kind of like a free for all. But you know, like in the company that I'm in right now, which they do lean more design heavy, like I can have a say in design, but like I can only have a say in design when I'm included in the conversation. And so like that's probably a little bit trickier about being on the wholesale side. And that they don't communicate as well until they need to, which I think is something that should be solved. So when you get into production, I think that's something that you should work towards is building relationships with your designers, your design teams, and your buyers as best you can, so that you know you can make the best decisions too.
So you would say like you would like in terms of like relationships in that sense, because like I said, I really do like the more creative aspect of production, like as much as I do like the business side, I do want to like work hand in hand with designers and kind of have like that creative aspects involved. So you would say like more so look like even now like I'm looking for internships and stuff, you would say more towards like the companies like Macy's, Walmart as opposed to wholesale or like just to start off.
I would say I don't know how much time you have left to do a bunch of internships, but yeah.
I would say it's supposed to be for next semester. so
Okay.
Just so
Because my thought is like if you can squeeze one each, I think that's the best. But the only reason why I say that is because every company is gonna be different, and also the people that you work with, they like you know you might be in a production team and they might not want to hear your opinion per se, because some production people do believe that should be a designer's job. Whereas in wholesale, like I said, it's kind of like a free for all, depending on where you work. But you could have an opinion, or people might ask you your opinion. Like I ask my team all the time, like literally I get two purples. One's just like a little more gray than the other one. The other like brighter. I'm going around the office and asking people which ones do you like better and kind of outweigh because like although I think I know what's right, my design team might have a differing opinion, and I need to like outweigh you know the decisions. And but yeah, but I would say like, yeah, on a wholesale side, you probably would get a little bit more experience in having a voice.
Okay.
But yeah, it depends. But if you could get both, I think that would be really helpful. And also just, you know, don't be afraid to speak up or have an opinion. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's true. Other questions? Yeah, to here and here.
I think your passion for fashion is still alive, even like after like all this, the deadlines and stuff like that. How do you like maintain that like, I don't know, like little spark, I guess?
Yeah, I wish I had like a good answer. But I mean, it's just like I love what I do. I don't do too much things outside of my day job though. Because I find that when I do try to design things outside of my work, I get exhausted. I do it really when I feel inspired. And so like I might like redesign a dress or like, you know, hem some things or make some scrunchies or something like, and I don't get too complex with some of my outside personnel projects. Probably the most complex one I'm working on is the textile waste artist, but you know, that I think, you know, that's kind of also, you know, grown from being in my master's program as well. But yeah, that's how I would say. I mean, and the thing I was saying earlier is like when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And I don't know, I do love fashion, I love what I do, I love design, I love trends, I love, you know, the whole cycle, and like, it's rough. It's rough when you work for difficult people, it's rough when you work long hours. But I mean, if you really wanna pursue fashion, then it's gonna be pretty easy. It's just about also having, I guess, like, you know, the mental strength though, to make it through to the next day and be like, okay, I'm willing to do this again. But yeah, that's probably how I can, but I don't exhaust myself. I definitely think that I can't do, because then I think I would then get jaded. Yeah.
You mentioned trade shows earlier, and I wanted to know like how you access trade shows.
Yeah.
Like private or.
They're all, at least, I'm pretty sure all of them are always open to students. I mean, the main trade shows are, at least the ones in New York, Tex World, Primer Vision's really small. When you're in sweaters, Spin Expo. Magic / Coterie, that's like one big trade show that happens at the same time. And I mean, I think personally do a lot of like research and try to stay in the know. I read Vogue, I read Business of Fashion, I read, I obviously go to the forecasters, but I do personally, Sourcing Journal, I do personally try to stay as up to date as possible when it comes to industry knowledge. And then so some other trade shows might come through. Also when you start working though in this industry, like there's another one, the denim one. Um, there's a big denim one that happens, but I've never really worked in denim, so
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
kingpins,
yes.
kingpins. So also too, when you want to learn about trade shows, when you're in the industry, people will tell you, oh, you should go to this, or you need to go to this. And then, but also too, like if you are active on WGSN, they'll do reports on, oh, Kingpin, here, this is what Kingpins is saying, this is what Text World is saying, this is what Spin is showing. And so that's also another way to be like, oh, okay, I need to look up Spin and see what are the dates they're coming back to in New York. Yeah, so I would say just if you're kind of in the know, you'll those will naturally kind of get surfaced to you.
Yeah. If I hear of any more that are happening throughout the semester, I'll definitely loop you in. But I would also say you could email the chair of your department, whichever department you're in, and say, hey, I'm interested in going to XYZ trade show. Do you have any idea how I can get tickets? And they might be able to point you in the right direction too. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for being here. This is wonderful. I do just want to go over really quickly for you all the event next week. And then I don't know if you have to run off, but maybe if anyone has any questions they didn't feel like asking in public forum.
Should I stay up here?
Oh, no, you can go, whatever you prefer. But you can go back to your seat. That's right. I think too fast. Okay. Next week. Oh, my new slide did not get uploaded. Shift. Change the slide. I thought, but maybe it didn't get there. Well, first of all, there are events happening the entire week, so I'm showcasing our class, but there are other things going on if you are interested in learning more about sustainability. And by the way, it's an alumni networking event that's happening after class. If you feel like coming back to FIT twice in a week, you can come join us next week. But our first, let's see if there's one down. Okay, so our kickoff event. As I mentioned, we're the kickoff. You do not need to RSVP. I already sent all your names into them. So when you arrive, there's going to be a name tag for you. If you're going to go to the networking event, you may want to wear that. Dr. Brown and Karen Pearson, who is the chair of the Sustainability Council, will be kicking off with opening remarks for the whole week on the importance of sustainability and on our campus. And then I'm moderating the panel, obviously, with Christy Kaler, who's the co-founder of 4 Days. and Shannon Goldberg, who is the founder and executive board member of Izzy Beauty. So we're going to be talking about launching your own sustainable brand, whether it be in more of an apparel-based way or all the way to beauty. And then afterwards, there's a networking mixer. So many alumni are invited. I don't know how far reaching it went. I don't know if you've heard about it elsewhere. But for light refreshments right next to the Katie Murphy Amphitheater. So plan to stick around if you can until 7 o'clock. But we'll be winding down around 5:30. So even if you have a class that starts at 6:30, you can at least join for part of it. And then since we're on the topic, just so you know, there's more happening throughout the week in the sustainability fair. There's a sustainability fair happening in the FIT Breezeway. So it's going to be outdoors. Hometown Flower will be there. Fab Scrap will be there, collecting fabric scraps. FIT Style Shop will be having a vintage sale. There'll be a community dye bath, digital protest tea photo booth, movie screening, The True Cost. How many of you in the room have seen the movie True Cost? Oh, guys, gotta watch it. Maybe you should go to the screening. It is a great, great, great film. Just kind of like setting the whole stage for why this is important and why we all kind of need to move this way in the near future. There'll be a Muslim recycling. Other opportunities, a $5,000 grant. You can hear a little bit more about that while you're at the fair. I mean, obviously this list goes on and on. There'll be a clothes mending that's also happening on Tuesday from 1 to 3. A food and fashion tour at FIT. You've all already known about that because we talked about it. You can attend that. Setting, measuring, and managing sustainability targets, and then this is actually, I'm going to be attending this as well. It's going to be at Golden Goose downtown with Professor Ann Cantrell. It's going to be down on Broome Street, but with Golden Goose Chief Executive Officer. Wednesday, more happening sustainability in the seams, 4:30 to 5:30. Thursday, there's a green roof tour if you haven't been to the green roof yet. And then at 10, there's a greenwashing in the fashion industry, how the Federal Trade Commission green guides and lawsuits guard against misleading claims. So this is kind of more of a legal standpoint on greenwashing. And then why fat phobia in fashion is a sustainability issue that's happening in the evening from 7 to 8. And kind of closing out on Friday, there'll be a soap making workshop. A Gen Space Scholar meeting if you are interested in pursuing that, being a Gen Space Scholar, and closing remarks by Karen Pearson at the end of the week. So action-packed week. There is a conference that happens in the springtime. This is kind of more educational in manner, and then there'll be a 2-day conference that happens in the springtime. So stay tuned for that as well. But I'm looking forward to next week. Let me know if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you there. Oh, I'm sorry. And for attendance next week, I'm going to be getting attendance from the people who are checking you in at the front desk. So I'm not going to like roll call the way we have been. So if you pick up your name tag, you will be counted as attending on time.
What's the capstone questions and where can I find them?
The capstone questions that I've been asking.
Yeah.
Are
they like graded?
No,
Oh.
we voted on them at the beginning of the semester for
Oh.
a survey.
Okay. Also, I heard that you were giving attendance at the end of that class that we had with the bad audio. I'm actually like sick and I had a sensory issue, so that's why I had to.
Okay. Do you want to write me about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, you mentioned something about the internet technology. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You guys are interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you to do this. Send me a